right, we are on Chapter 9, Talent, Careers, and Development. And this is where the employee has now come into the organization. They've been onboarded, they're training, they're kind of stepping into their career, at least this chapter of their career at your company, whether it's a new hire or someone who's more senior. So like the overarching umbrella that we want to look at is this concept of talent management. So let me just go through it. Identifying the most important jobs in a company. Let's pause right there. This begins with figuring out what your core competencies are. Like what is an area where you can't afford to fail at your company. So if you're Google, it's probably your programmers. It's probably not your landscapers. If you're Boeing, it's probably your engineers. It's probably not fill in the blank, whatever else, your operators. So there's in each particular firm, based on their core competency, that gives them a competitive advantage over everyone else. There are a handful of positions to say this is an area where we can't fail specifically. So identifying those jobs, and it doesn't mean other jobs aren't important. It just means that's your core competency. They provide a long-term and competitive advantage. And then once you've identified them, my summation of this last half is, how do we not fail in this area? We need to have contingency plans, and we need to have a plan to back up that plan. One of my favorite movies is Armageddon with Bruce Willis, and he's talking with NASA, and he goes, I'm sure you have a backup plan, and then people thinking about that plan, and then people thinking backing them up. So something like that. So when you can't fail, obviously you take it a little bit more seriously. So what we do is we find those jobs. We staff them through recruiting, selection, and placement, yes, and then when they're in those jobs, this is what we begin to think about: training, development, appraisals, all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a career model. And then in the end, in theory, we have management talent to lead. We have important job, whatever that core competency is, we have that talent in place, as well as a plan to back it up, and people who are cared for and therefore look favorably upon the organization. The target jobs, after they've been identified, the next step is to quickly go into the idea of what does it take to do that job well. So it's a KSAO, I guess, inventory, knowledge, skills, abilities, and then we might say other, like competencies. But a KSA inventory. So if someone's going to kill it in this job, they need to know this. They need to have the skills in this area, and they need to have these abilities and be able to leverage them in the workplace. Once we have the inventory, now what you have is, when I hire people, I'm looking at those KSAs. When I develop people, I'm looking at those KSAs. And when people leave, I'm looking at those KSAs to see what's actually walking outside of my company so I can develop it and replace it. So there's different models of this. I did one called a skills management system, which is an inventory. Like, that works. This has to be updated, obviously, continually change, especially in certain sectors. But without this kind of list or this model of, this is what people in this job, which we all agree is one of the most important jobs of the company, this is what these people have to be able to do. That tells us, that informs everything: hiring, firing, promotion, demotion, etc. down the line. A component in this, of course, is succession planning. If I have someone who has a unique skill set that my company desperately needs, and there's one of those humans, I better have a succession plan, because life happens and car accidents happen and families relocate and stuff changes. You can't just assume, oh, as long as that guy's here, that lady's here, we're going to be fine. No, heck no. Succession planning is when we say this person is going to leave eventually. If they left today, what's our plan? And if everyone sits around and scratches their head, that means you don't have a succession plan. A succession plan is, there's no fear when anybody from the top of the company to the bottom company decides they're not coming to work tomorrow or ever. We have a plan for that. There's a lot of pilots end up taking this class as part of their management sequence, and pilots are great because, like, if something goes wrong with the aircraft, you just pull out a clipboard and go, we've got a plan for that. Like, there's an app for that, right? So it's kind of like that. There's, no matter what happens with our human capital, we have a plan and we're ready to go. And part of that plan is identifying who are we call a hypo, the high potential people. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I think people get like psychologically screwed up on hypo. People come on and off a succession plan list. It doesn't mean that you like them and you don't. It means something's changed in the career and the organization. People come on and off high potential lists, and that's hurtful for them. So some companies have said, you know what, this isn't worth it, because if we tell someone in year 2 they're high potential, and in year 5 it's like, well, they're not really being considered anymore, then you end up losing them, which is otherwise a good employee. So you can see on the left is potential assessment. Potential assessment, meaning do they have potential? Are they coming in with kind of the raw materials that need to be refined in terms of judgment or ability, verbal intelligence, whatever it is, and can we develop them? And along the bottom is, how are they actually doing with that? You might find someone who's absolutely incredible. You see they have so much potential, but they're just not delivering. They're not performing well on the job. You put that in the category of a rough diamond. Like they're not doing it. They need to be refined. They're not ready yet. Or someone who consistently gets high performance ratings, but they don't demonstrate competencies that they can grow in the company into those vital positions, those vital jobs. That's the lower right. You'd say that's a high professional, meaning like they're good. Where we put them, they're good. If we move them, they may not be good anymore. Stuff like that. So you can use this as kind of a framework to go through, but the reason I don't like it is we put a name in a box, and then the name ends up staying in that box even if the person changes their potential or their performance. So it needs to be adaptable. It's contingent upon time. And in terms of overall kind of career management, I mean, the historical model is that the organization is the owner of the person's career development, meaning they say when they're going to get promoted, how much money they're going to make, what their next job assignment is going to be. And then we find that people who are entering the workforce go, well, what if I don't like your idea? What if I want to do something else? And the company says, well, this is our plan for you. And the person says, peace out, sucker. Like that's not what it is for me. So now it's very much joint, where the organization goes, okay, what do we need in the future? What kind of leaders do we need, and skill sets do we need? Is there a match here with you and what you want to do? And then you go to the bottom when the person says, here's what I think I'm good at. And sometimes they're way off. Like we call this self-awareness. They go, I'm good at this, and everyone around them goes, no, you're not. Well, okay, then there's some coaching. And a lot of times you find people who don't know they're excellent at something and need to be affirmed in that way. Next person, a big component of the bottom, the individual perspective, is what do I want to do, right? You've got the baby boomer generation that's like work, productivity, it kind of the stereotypes, right? Is faithful, they're not going to turn over, etc. Then you got Gen X that saw their parents, kind of work themselves forever and retire with a gold watch, and they go, I don't want to do that. I'm not so interested in titles or even money. I want to go do something cool. I want to go do something different. And so they require a bit more interface. Finally, you have the millennials that are looking for much more of the balance and this idea of I want to make an impact. Millennials, 6 months onto a job, they're like, I'm going to quit. Well, why are you going to quit? Because I was brought into a job where my work isn't mattering. It's not my pay, it's not supervision, it's not anything, but what I'm doing, I don't feel like it's making an impact. Remember that from the job characteristics model called task significance or task identity. So these two things come together. So I don't go to someone and say, hey, here's a succession plan and you're going to be on it. I say, hey, here's this position in the company. Think like you're moving in this direction. Do you want to? This is kind of how we see you. Is that how you see you? Do you see you as something different? So it's much more in a consultation kind of role. Overall, in the overall career planning at an individual level, what the person thinks, the charts like this always crack me up because they're so variant, but here's the big idea. Figure out who you are. Like, what do you want? What are you about? Figure out how you're viewed. How do other people see you? Is there alignment there? Developing self-awareness. With who you are and how you're viewed, what are your options? Are your options the technical route? Is it the management route? Is it something else? Is it you want to do sales? You want to do operations? Then you create your plan and then execute your plan. Here's the problem with that. Who I was at 20 is very different than who I was at 35, and probably different than who I'm going to be at 45. So that changes. When that changes, the plan should change. How I'm viewed is highly dependent on what context I'm in. There are some consistencies, but there's a lot of variance too. Therefore, my options are going to shift. Therefore, what I actually want to do is going to shift. So this is kind of like the individual, at an individual human level, the strategic planning process. This is our strategic plan based on the information we have right now. That might change in 3 months. It probably won't change tomorrow. It is definitely going to change in 5 years. So just like hold it loosely. But the idea here is you don't just go get a job and go, we'll see what happens next. You kind of want to be intentional about what the end point is going to be. There's a book called 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which I don't really like the book, but